Listen, man, Jim Burt made a video on Luca when you're the best player in the world and no one cares. That's how I take it of itself, man. Let's get into it, man.
What do you call a player who is averaging 34, 9, and 10 a game on 62% true shooting? The face
Luka?
of the NBA? The best basketball player in the world? How about the player who is 4th on the NBA's MVP leaderboard at the moment? 10 years ago, these numbers would have had a player in conversations as the greatest basketball player ever, let alone the MVP for a season. But now this stat line hardly even earns you a shot to become the league's most valuable player. Lately, I've been paying close attention to how the MVP race is playing out this season, and it's going about how you would expect. The season started out with Jokic leading the race coming off a very controversial decision last season. Then Joel Embiid morphed into a basketball god for 2 months and buried all hopes of anyone else winning the award. And then he got hurt, and Jokic jumped back out in front and has held the top spot ever since, with currently SGA in 2nd and Giannis in 3rd. But as I was going over the timeline of the race this season, one thing jumped out at me. Why is Luka Doncic so low? I'm going back and looking at some of his performances and his numbers from this season, and yep, they're still completely unreal. So why is he all the way in 4th place at the moment? Have voters gone on a Luka strike? They all...
My thing is the whole logic of Luka putting up best in the world numbers, why aren't we paying attention to him, can literally be applied to all the top 5 candidates, right? So, with all due respect to Luka, when I look at Giannis and say, yeah, Giannis is putting up 31, 11, and 6 on 62% shooting. Mind you, LeBron was best in the world, putting up 28, 7, and 7. You know what I'm saying? And this is not that far off from those numbers. I'm on really good efficiency. So, Giannis is doing that same thing. When I look at Jokic, right? Jokic is doing these best in the world, unanimous best in the world, best of all time numbers. Jokic is putting up 27. Oh, this per 36, excuse me. Jokic is putting up 26, 12, and 9. Again, like, damn, how is he not the best in the world? And on a lesser note, because I know those two guys, and Embiid is in that conversation as well, are the stat juggernauts. SGA has also entered that conversation. 31, 6, and 6, 54% from the field, leading the league in with 2 steals, getting you a block a game, which I feel like is underrated at this point, with the number 1 record in the Western Conference. And to really stretch it out, I know some of y'all are going to hate me for this, but when there's a guy leading his team to a 66-68 win record, putting up 27, 8, and 5 on good efficiency, and he's like a dark horse in the MVP. I mean, hey man, there's a lot of great players doing great things, putting up great numbers at the end of the day. So
just collectively decided they're not going to vote for him? I don't know, maybe his play style is just too polarizing to reward. His game right now is often compared to prime James Harden, and we all know how that turned out. But even Harden and all of his antics still won an MVP award. On the NBA's last weekly recap of the race, it seems they've taken a strong stance on his chances of winning the award up to this point. Sorry, Mavs fans, but the standings matter. We understand he scored 25 plus points in 9 straight games.
They said that weeks ago.
But flashy highlights and massive numbers aside, Doncic needs to lift Dallas out of play-in tournament territory to climb near the top of this list. But that isn't true, is it? In fact, I know it's not, because other players have won just as many games as Luka is winning this season, with worse numbers and less individual dominance, and they still went on to win the MVP. Luka Doncic is being held to a higher standard than anyone else right now. And I think we might be looking at the MVP award and how we value players all wrong.
If that's the premise of this video, I might have to disagree like crazy. Because even in those outlier years, which I do think it's important to understand, it's an outlier year. Not to say that Luka's not having a crazy season. There would probably be one name close to X players statistically, right? 2017, it was James Harden. 1998, maybe like Magic Johnson during that time. With Luka, listen, I get it. like Luka is putting up crazy numbers, and I do think from an individual statistic perspective, Luka is having the best season out of all the candidates. But I'm sorry, I can't just snub I can't just snub another guy putting up 26 points, more rebounds, roughly around the same amount of assists, and I would just consider just a better passer than Luka, which is saying a lot, but Jokic is one of them ones. And from a scoring perspective, my opinion is coasting. I'm just keeping a stack. I think if Jokic really wanted to, he could put up 30. But yeah, it's just outside of Jokic, Giannis again is putting up 30, 11, and 6, bro. Like I don't know. So I guess the argument is the season Luka having one of those outlier seasons, right? Is it one of those outlier seasons that does deserve an exception to the rule? And I will say this. I've said this about the MVP conversation for a couple years now. I do think the criteria now is much different than what it was pre-2017. And it's a good thing. It is a good thing. I believe it's a sign that NBA fans are more nuanced when it comes to analyzing basketball. It's a sign that NBA fans aren't just, hey, MVP's best player on the best team. Like, nah. There's other players having better individual performances. So let's look at those players, even though they're not having as much team success as another player because they just don't have as much help. You know, I do think that's a great sign for NBA discourse. So with that being said, is it one of those outlier seasons? 34, 10, and 9. Hey, 34, 10, and 9 is crazy. I don't know, bro. 34, 10, and 9. And the efficiency is good too, because I like with Russ when he was doing his shit, like the efficiency was a really big thing for people. But 49 from the field, 38 from 3, and 79%. That's a career high too. 79% from the line. Luka is a bad man. Luka is a bad fucking man.
Today's book, Doncic used 50 draft pick in 20 by his team. He immediately. When Luka Doncic first entered the league in 2018,
Luka.
He immediately leapfrogged all the assumptions we had about his game and his potential. By his second season, his 29 points, 9 rebounds, and 9 assists a game earned him first-team All-NBA and a 4th place finish in the MVP voting at just 21 years old. By the end of his second season, the general perception was that this guy was the future of the NBA. An MVP award was inevitable, and it would happen sooner than later. But Luka is now in his 6th season in the league, and despite getting better nearly every single season, his place on the MVP leaderboard has only fallen virtually every season. Voters seeming to become less and less interested in this Luka magic. How did Luka's best case for the most valuable player in the NBA come in just his 2nd season and has only gone downhill since? Are we looking at the MVP award all wrong? Is it even possible for someone to be the most valuable player in the NBA while not elevating their team to a title contender? A question not applying to just Luka, but to any player in general.
I would even argue that Luka's low-key getting... Oh my God, I'm gonna sound like a dick rider when I say this. The Jason Tatum effect, bro. This is a player that we've touted as that next guy since after his rookie season. There was a lot of that when it came to Luka going into the league. But once, okay, this is one of them ones. By his second season when he was averaging 30 and did what he did in the bubble, everyone was like, yeah, this dude is next up. He's about to win hella MVPs. He's the future face of the league, all of that. Couldn't find out 4 years later, he still hasn't won that MVP that, there was a stretch, bro. Oh, God, 3 years in a row, Luka was the favorite to win MVP. And he just hasn't grasped that, hasn't gotten that. And now we're turning to the, all right, bro, I'm done with this dude. He's not that guy. He's a stat pattern. He's all of these things. When in reality, he's not. I think another dude that I feel like is going to suffer the same, oh, he's been in front of our eyes. Y'all have been pushing him for so much, and he hasn't done shit. Stop pushing him in front of my face, is going to be Anthony Edwards. I'm telling you that right now. I'm seeing the signs. For back-to-back years, people have been pushing him. And even though he's having a tremendous season, he is ahead of where he's supposed to be. Trust me, in 2 years, when he hasn't won a championship, when he isn't in MVP discussions, because he is not the type of dude to put up, 30-point triple-doubles on a night-in-night-out basis. He's not putting up 32, 14, and 5 like a Giannis. And when Victor becomes, 28, 14, 4 with 4 blocks, and Ant isn't in these MVP discussions, but y'all are pushing him as the face of the league. Trust me, on God, I will bet a shit ton of money on it. Y'all will turn on Ant. So Ant fans, Timberwolves fans, and listen, man, I love Ant. He's one of my favorite young players. But enjoy this right now, this period in time right now. This is the honeymoon phase. We had this phase with Devin Booker as well until he got shitted on by Luka. We had this with D Book as well. He's on the screen right now. We had this with D Book as well. But he's become one of the most hated players in the league now. I'm telling you, the time's coming, man. They big up you. They big up you in the beginning to preposterous expectations. But when you don't meet these insane expectations, they're going to turn on you. It happens every time. It happens every time.
Where exactly is the balance between individual dominance and team success when evaluating the top talents in the NBA? If the Nuggets ran into some injuries and had a tough stretch of games and somehow fell to the 7th seed, would we be willing to admit that Nikola Jokic is still the best and most valuable player in the league despite the lack of team success? Is it possible to get voter fatigue or even player fatigue before a player has even won anything? Here's a number for you. 41.8. This is the number you get if you combine the average points, rebounds, and assists per game of every MVP winner over the last 30 years. This season, Luka is averaging 53.2 combined points, rebounds, and assists, the highest combined total since Kareem over 50 years ago in 1972. And putting up numbers like this usually results in winning games and winning an MVP. Most of the players near the top of this list have earned the award for their efforts. Kareem missed out on the award in 1973, but he already won back-to-back MVPs in the previous 2 seasons. James Harden came in second in 2019, but he already won the award in the previous season as well. Luka.
You know what's crazy? My bad. I'm not trying to cut Jimmy off like a lot in this video. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think the reason why Luka does not get taken as seriously as he should be is because of all these conversations we're having this year about defense not existing, comparing eras, and how today's game is so inflated in terms of statistics to the point where we're looking at Luka and saying, we don't care about this shit, man. Inflated era, no defense. Of course Luka will put that shit up. We statistically speaking, I think NBA fans are having trouble to even visualize what an outlier season is. When in this same season, there was another dude averaging 34 points a game, right? When I just mentioned 30, 11, and 6 from Giannis, when I just mentioned 26, 12, and 9 from Jokic, it's hard to understand what an outlier season is. Is as great as 34, 10, and 9 is that really an outlier season? Or if we look at, the per 100 possessions, the per 36 minutes is actually equivalent to, 10 years ago, 28, 6, and 6. I think people are having trouble grasping those differences. And I think it's unfortunate. I think it is unfortunate. And I think the way the MVP rankings work right now is kind of like a counter to the counter, right? For years, it was winning, best player on the best team. Then for the last couple of years, we've kind of reverted to, okay, let's talk about impact, let's talk about statistics, let's talk about all of that. But now when everyone is putting up these crazy statistics and impact and all of that, now let's revert back to winning. And if you look at the MVP ladder that Jimmy High Roller mentioned in the video, hella winning bias. And I understand this is one dude making that article, but hella winning bias, especially against Luka. Luka isn't in these conversations because he's not, a top seed. He's in the play-in tournament, this, that, and the third. A lot of that. And I also think, side note, a week-by-week power ranking MVP ladder, essentially showing people the progress of the MVP race, I feel like is hella flawed. And I think we've seen it over the last couple of years. When you make this weekly updated ladder to show who's leading the MVP race, that makes it what it is. It makes it a race. And when it comes to a race, you can, like, if you look at these last couple MVP races, what's really mattered is how you finish the season. Well, not really, but a big part of it is how you finish the season. If Jokic slows down in the last 10 games, but there's another dude turning the fuck up, he might take that leap by the end of the year because he had a tremendous end of the season, and now he's going to win MVP, right? Same thing with Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Tit for tat the whole season. But then when Russ hit that game winner 50-point triple-double against the Nuggets, that's what closed the deal for a lot of people. And I don't think that should be the case. Within this 82-game sample size, I understand it's fun to make a ladder that updates every single week so we have things to talk about. But it really should be, at the end of the 82 games, let's look at these seasons as a whole and who had the best season. It should not be this weekly updated thing, bro. It shouldn't.
Luka, on the other hand, seems to be suffering from a rare case of voter fatigue before winning any awards. Raising the bar to first-team All-NBA in just your sophomore season means every year after that must be even better if you really want to captivate an audience.
Yeah.
And Luka has gotten better every single season. So maybe he's just not winning enough games. The unwritten rule about the MVP award has always been that you not only need to be great, but your team needs to be great. But this isn't always the case. In fact, recently, it's hardly the case, and voters have not shied away from rewarding exceptional seasons, even if it didn't result in overall team success. In 1987, after just over 2 seasons in the league, Michael Jordan finished second in MVP voting ahead of generational talents and vets of the 80s, despite closing the season with a record below 500. And vets of the 80s...
Look at these stats real quick, right? This is Jordan. Where's Jordan
finished...
This is Jordan right here. 37-5-5. I believe he averaged like 2 steals and 2 blocks that season too. No one is coming close to that. No one. Maybe Larry Bird, right? You'd have to look at a Larry Bird putting up 28, 9, and 8. Magic was putting up 24, 6, and 12. But when you look at two-way impact plus these numbers offensively, no one's coming close to that. Now, again, I still think Luka has a pretty sizable lead compared to everyone in terms of the offensive side of the ball. But there's a lot of other MVP candidates who are better on the other side of the ball, while offensively are giving you 26 and 10, are giving you 30, 31 and 6 when it comes to SGA. You know what I'm saying? So and Giannis.
Second in MVP voting ahead of generational talents and vets of the 80s, despite closing the season with a record below 500 and finishing the season on a stretch of 15 losses in 23 games.
Oh my God.
He was young, he was unproven, and yet voters were still so enamored by his individual dominance that they just looked past the lack of team success. One argument you can make for this season is the fact that it happened nearly 40 years ago in a league where numbers like this were unheard of.
Yeah.
But a similar case of crazy numbers and individual performance outweighing overall team performance just happened again a couple seasons ago.
Yeah.
In 2022, Nikola Jokic won the league MVP after finishing the season with just 48 wins and the 6th seed in the West. His numbers were incredible and his advanced metrics were even better. In fact, he was so good that the lackluster 48-win total was a bit of an afterthought for many voters. The only thing is, this season, the Mavericks are on pace to winning 48 games as well. And as loaded as Jokic's stat line was in that 2022 MVP campaign, Luka's numbers are just about as good this season. So how does one of these seasons earn a player his second consecutive MVP, and the other hardly even earn a player a spot on the MVP leaderboard? But I think the most glaring case of a player winning over voters with a historic individual season was back in 2017, when Russell Westbrook lit the whole league on fire for 81 games and averaged a 30-point triple-double for an entire season. This was just 7 years ago, and it's already easy to forget just how inconceivable this was at the time. There is not a person on earth who thought a player could average a triple-double for an entire season. So when Westbrook pulled it off, the MVP award had his name on it, and rightfully so. But the Thunder finished with the 6th seed and just 47 wins. In fact, James Harden and Kawhi Leonard both had strong cases to be the most valuable player in the league that season. So again, what has changed between then and now? How did we go from being so captivated with a stat line like this to just casually brushing aside a similar season in just 7 years? But Westbrook's triple-double season in 2017 didn't just shatter our ideas of what were possible from an individual player. His season completely altered the way MVP voting works altogether. Up until Westbrook's 2017 season, the MVP award was virtually the best player on the best team award. If your team wasn't the first seed or on occasion the second seed going into the playoffs, your chances of winning the award were almost non-existent.
For those who don't know, prior to 2017, and I think even including 2017, up until 2020, 95%, might have been higher, bro. 95% of MVP winners were on teams that had a top 4 record in the league, period, point blank. 95%. I would like to look at exactly how many of them had the best record in the league, but I would assume a big majority of them as well. But I think MVP voters were at least, they were cognizant, I don't even know if that's the right word, of like, okay, Shaq and Kobe are together, right? And they won 60 games, but Tim Duncan leading his team to 58 wins. He should probably get MVP when he doesn't have another superstar on his team. Same thing when KG won. Same thing when AI won. That's been a consistent thing. So I guess we're just seeing the evolution of that, I guess.
1988 to 2016, 23 of 29 regular season MVPs went to players who led their team to the best record in their conference. 5 of the 29 MVPs went to players who earned the 2nd seed, and only 1 went to a player who didn't lead their team to a top 2 seed. But with Westbrook's MVP in 2017, voters of the award and fans in general almost recalibrated the way they approached the discussion of who the most valuable player in the league can be and what is required of them. Because 4 of the last 7 MVPs finished the season with the 3rd seed or lower. This season, Jokic is favored to win the award, and the Nuggets are on pace to finishing the season with the 3rd seed as well. Something that only occurred once in 37 seasons and required the best player of all time to put up the best individual season of his career is about to happen for the 5th time in just 8 years. It's almost as if overnight we all realize that winning the most games is not the end-all be-all to what makes a player the most valuable. 10 years ago, an NBA fan posted this on Reddit, and reading it is almost like jumping into a time machine and traveling into the past. He goes on to list the last 30 MVP winners and the seed they earned going into the playoffs, recognizing the correlation between winning the most games and winning the MVP. And he posted this with a note at the end that tells you everything you need to know about how the award worked just 10 years ago. I put this on here so people hopefully stop making unlikely MVP predictions. No, Anthony Davis is not going to lead the Pelicans to the 5th seed and win MVP. And the comments on this thread are just as insightful as the post itself. So is it really an MVP award? In theory, yes, but maybe it's more of a best player on the best team.
So this is also a discussion I've been having with the MVP award, right? Is the MVP award, when people say, oh, it's the most valuable player award, it should go to the most valuable player. I get where people are coming from when people say that. But I would argue that the MVP loses, because as you can see, there is, whether we like it or not, there is a precedent. There is an unspoken criteria as to what an MVP is. And oftentimes it is correlated to the dude putting up great numbers on one of the best teams in the league. I would argue that the MVP means more when the criteria is way more consistent than trying to recalibrate what that means every single year. You know what I'm saying? Even though it's not really what it is, when there's a consistent criteria as to what it is, it makes it seem like, okay, you fit this criteria, you get the award. Instead of every single year, it feels like, and I do feel like NBA fans have this exact sentiment when it comes to the MVP award. It feels like we're just picking and choosing every single year. You know, I've heard so many different people, former players, everyone analyzing the game, have this same sentiment about the MVP award ever since 2017. Is that it just feels like we're picking and choosing when winning matters or not. When in actuality, I don't even think that's the case, but that's the perception. When you know, the criteria is based off of individual impact way more than a consistent floor level, surface level criteria, like who's a dude putting up great numbers on a winning team.
Players do not win MVPs getting 6th seeds, overwhelming majority of the time, because this is a superstar league and superstars get top seeds. And this fan is right, or at least he was 10 years ago. So why did we make exceptions for other players and continue to do so, but we hold Luka to such a strict standard? If the Mavs went on a nice stretch of wins to close out the season and finished with, let's say, 53 wins instead of 48, finished with the 4th seed instead of the 6th, would that really help Luka's case? The Mavs could have an easy schedule to close out the season. Kyrie could go on a tear. The team could get into a rhythm and earn a higher seed, and Luka could be playing at the same level he did all season. But since they're winning more games, none of which had anything to do with Luka playing better, he would miraculously have a better case for the MVP? I know this is how it works. This is the nature of this award. But it's still a bit odd that there is so much weight put into some factors when considering who the most valuable player in the league is. And the season Luka is having in particular is shining a massive light on this irrational way of going about this. Is Jason Tatum more valuable than Luka this season? You could make the argument, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who would, including the NBA's MVP leaderboard. And yet, Luka has been more valuable this season according to virtually every single metric other than win totals. Jason Tatum has missed 5 games this season, and in those games, the Celtics have outscored their opponents by 77 points. This season, Luka has missed 8 games, and in those games, the Mavericks have been outscored by 47 points. When Jason Tatum isn't on the court, the Celtics are plus 10.1 points per 100 possessions this season. When Luka isn't on the court, the Mavericks are minus 2.8 points per 100 possessions this season. When Tatum isn't on the court, the Celtics are still really good. When Luka isn't on the court, the Mavericks are terrible.
I don't like that logic. And y'all are gonna call me a dick rider, but I just remember the conversations we were having about 2018 Kyrie, hell, even 2017 Kawhi Leonard. This idea of knocking a player just because of how good their team is without them, I completely disagree with. And I'm not even here to say that Tatum is better than Luka, because I do genuinely believe Luka is a better player than Tatum. And to his team, Luka is more valuable than Jason Tatum. So I'm not making that case. But I just don't like his methodology of showing that, I guess. And the reason is that value is supposed to be the difference between what your team is with you and what your team is without you, right? So again, I don't necessarily know the numbers off the top of my head, but let's just say without Tatum, the Celtics are a plus 10. With Jason Tatum, just hypothetically, they're a plus 25. To me, Jason Tatum is the difference between those two numbers. It's the plus 15. I understand there's still more nuance that needs to be discussed with that, right? But just from a surface level perspective, the difference is is what you are with this guy and what you are isn't. That gap is what your value is, even in this very surface level argument. So to just point out these numbers, because let's say another team is -5 without said player, but when they're on the court, they're a +2. The difference is negative. The difference is 7. Is a +7. I would still argue that even though the other guy on the better team does have a better team and they can function without that best player, if they go from, let's say, offensively, a top 5 defense, a top 5 offense in the league, to a historically great, arguably greatest offense of all time, when this player is on the court versus when he's not, that player is more valuable than the other dude just floor raising, effectively speaking. Now, is that the case in this regard? Let's look at the on-off numbers, and I understand this there's also nuance with this, the personnel around the team, the system that they run, you know what I'm saying? Because the Mavs are way more heliocentric than the Boston Celtics. So we can look at these on-off numbers as well. So on-off, right? We can see that on the court, the Dallas Mavericks have an offensive rating of 120, defensive rating of 117. When Luka's off the court, they have an offensive rating of 114. Defensive rating effectively the same. So the difference there is really just offensively. And he has an overall net rating of +6.2. Correct me if I'm wrong, stat nerds, if I do that correctly, but I believe that is how that works. As a +6.2. Now we go with Jason Tatum. Oh, we're already here. Okay. Now we go with Jason Tatum. And again, I'm looking at these numbers right now. Definitely not the case with Jason Tatum. Because on the court, they have a 124.5 offensive rating. Off the court, they have a 121.8. Offensive rating wise, defensive rating, they have a 112.4 with Tatum on the court. They get a little bit worse actually, or they get a little bit better defensively when Tatum is off the court. So he has a net rating of 1.8. So again, Jason Tatum is not the perfect example for this, but just looking at what their teams are without them, it is still flawed to me. Cause what's a better example? Let's look up Kyrie. I think Kyrie is probably a better example. Let's go to 2018, right? Because people specifically this season like to point out that they were really good without Kyrie. So look at this. Off the court, they have a 104.6 offensive rating, but when he's on the court, 111.7, right? And I think defensively they do get better without Kyrie, so his net rating is at a 3.2. But effectively, same thing. That might be a better example right there. Let's keep going.
To look at how many wins a team has as the driving factor for the MVP race neglects how teams even got those wins and how much the best player on that team is contributing to those wins. Now, this season might actually be a case of the league getting a whole lot better, or maybe just the stats getting better, rather than voters and fans appreciating different aspects of the game and its players than they did in the past. The threshold for what it takes to make, let's say, an all-NBA team, earn the label of superstar, and win the league's MVP has been raised so high that a player could have a one-of-one, unprecedented season and not even get a mention as one of the league's best players. A great case of this is Domantas Sabonis, who is averaging 20 points, 13 rebounds, and 8 assists a game right now.
That is crazy.
And he wasn't even selected as an all-star this season. These are not empty stats. He's not a product of the system he plays in. He is a certified star. But since there's a guy in the league who can do all of this and more, he ends up being unjustly labeled as the watered-down version of Nikola Jokic. It feels a bit surreal that we live in a time where a player like Luka Doncic exists with numbers like these, and the MVP award isn't already boxed up and on the way to his house as we speak. And this realization is less about Luka and more about the big picture of the league right now. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around how much things have changed, and even harder to grasp how quickly they have changed. How can he be this good and still be trailing behind multiple other players? If it wasn't for Embiid getting hurt, Luka could very well not even be within the top 5 on the MVP leaderboard. while averaging nearly a 34-point triple-double and being on pace for 48 wins. Which begs the question, what would a player in Luka's position need to do to win the MVP?
Yeah.
With the 6th seed, an underwhelming supporting cast, and a handful of generational superstars to contend with, what would be the equivalent to the 2017 Westbrook triple-double season in 2024, where the numbers are just too absurd to ignore? 38, 10 and 10, maybe 40 points, 12 rebounds, and 12 assists a night on league-high efficiency? It sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. How good do you have to be to win the MVP in today's NBA? When you put the bar as high as Luka did at such a young age, how much higher would you need to go for it to be impossible for fans and voters to ignore your efforts? Or is the MVP award still just the best player on the best team award?
So, again, I do think at the end of the day, the biggest problem with Luka's case is, one, he set the bar really high, and number two, fans don't know what constitutes an MVP award now. And number three, people don't know what an outlier season is. They don't know what an outlier season is. We've had so many conversations this year about defense not existing in the league, pace being too high, that within the scope of this season, we do not know what an outlier season is. There's a guy putting up 34, 10, and 9, leading his team to 49 wins on good efficiency, and we do not know if this is an outlier season in the case of the MVP or not. We just don't. My biggest critique with Jimmy's video, though, is just, I think he undermined Jokic's MVP case a little bit too much. I have Luka 2 on my list. Because I said this, I think when they faced the Nuggets, I'm just really warming up to Luka averaging 34, 10, and 9 on good efficiency, with Kyrie missing a handful of games, with Kyrie missing a handful of games, with, who's their center? I'm blanking out on their names. With Derek Lively missing a handful of games, and them not really getting their and them not getting PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford till the second half of the season. That team winning 49 games on the back of Luka is very impressive to me. So I have Luka second on my list, but when you got another guy in the league putting up 26, 12, and 9 on better efficiency, I believe. Hold on, let me look at the efficiency metrics. Luka's true shooting is at 61.5. Jokic's true shooting is at 64.9. Understand Luka, the context around Luka's help, and all of that. So you might still make the case that Luka's having a better scoring season. And I would. I'm going to be honest with you. I would. But I just cannot scoff at 26, 12, and 9 while also leading his team to the second best record in the league. Because I think the Denver Nuggets right now are on pace to win. Let's see. There's about 10 games left. The Denver Nuggets are on pace to win 82 times 0.704. They're on pace to win 60 games. You know what I'm saying? So, understand 30-point triple-double this. There's another guy who's pretty close to averaging a 26 point per game triple-double, leading his team to 60 wins on really good efficiency, while arguably already being the best in the world after what he did last season. I understand it's just in the scope of this 82-game season. But even if you want to discount that last part I just said, just scoffing at Jokic, I personally don't agree with. Tatum's out of this race. I've been saying this, man. Tatum is one of those players that I don't think will ever win an MVP. Not because he's not in these top 5 conversations. It's just I don't see him putting up these crazy numbers. It's interesting to me because a while ago, we were talking about MVP, Tatum's MVP case being, he might not have the great numbers, but this team is winning at an astronomical margin compared to everyone else. Is he the MVP? Now here we are with Luka, and we're having the exact opposite conversation in terms of, his team's not winning, but his numbers are ridiculous. And I just think Jokic is that great middle ground. Great middle ground of he's putting up crazy numbers and he's winning. Give the award to him. Just give it, bruh. Because why not? So, with that being said, shout out to Jimmy for the video. Appreciate y'all for watching this one. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. And I'm out, man. Peace.